Federal prosecutors have charged a Chinese professor with fraud for allegedly stealing technology from a California company to help Huawei. Court documents don't specifically name the company that's targeted, but this marks the latest headache for the Chinese telecommunications giant. Joining us now is Tom Ridge. He served as the first head of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. He's also now on an advisory board member of Global Cyber Policy Watch. Secretary, it's great to have you on today. Let me just start by asking you about Huawei, because there have been a number of allegations that have been thrown out there, whether it is the allegation of IP theft or the accusations of spying. When you look at how the company operates, what worries you most?
Well, first of all, the allegations are based upon information gleaned from the incredible work of our intelligence community with connections worldwide. So I think they're more than allegations. They're not baseless claims. That's a legitimate concern about national security. But there are many aspects of Huawei's involvement that should give everyone cause for concern, given their collaboration with North Korea, Russia, Syria, and Iran, given the use of their technology to suppress minorities in the western provinces in China. We're pretty confident that they installed backdoors into some of the networks in Europe, including an allegation from Vodafone. It's pretty clear that their conduct demonstrates time and time again they are an instrumentality of the government, who, by the way, in 2017 said that any Chinese company, if you believe that this is a company that can operate independently, any Chinese company that is demanded by their government to share information gleaned by their activity as a private company, they have to share with the government. And by the way, I think the ownership is 1% private sector. About 99% of the employees are similar to public employees. So the connection between a government that can compel this company potentially to embed spyware into the software inside the next 5G system ought to be of great concern with everyone. Interesting, the Europeans are doing an assessment right now. They should hear by October 1st, the UK and EU, to determine whether or not they even want Huawei embedded into their system.
Well, so let me follow up on that, because we are expecting that assessment to come down on October 1st. And yet, when you look at Europe, for all of the efforts from this administration to try and get some of the European allies on board in banning Huawei, they haven't necessarily had the kind of success they would have liked across the board. You look at a country like Germany, the UK now calling for a full evaluation of Huawei yet again. Why do you think there hasn't been as much buy-in if all those arguments you just laid out have already been proven?
Well, I hope that the global assessment, particularly among allies, all of whom are democracies, and all of them should be super sensitive to how this technology has been used and abused by the Chinese government around the world, for them to suggest that it can't be used and abused in relationship to their network is somewhat dismaying to me. So let's keep our fingers crossed that they come up with the right decision. Our intelligence community is absolutely convinced. And by the way, I think part of the appeal might be it's subsidized, so it's cheaper, and they're a little bit further ahead than Nokia and Ericsson, so you might be able to get your 5G system installed a little bit quicker, but cheaper and faster is not a reason to compromise national security. So let's hope that their assessment is as clear and their vision is as clear as it needs to be. This is a potential national security problem. And listen, we all know that the countries and companies, they're responsible for industrial espionage. Countries are looking over each other's shoulder, but to allow them to walk in the front door with their software, as we, in the digital forevermore, in the 5G network, we want faster data exchanges, but in the Internet of Things would be, in my judgment, irresponsible, particularly in light of the assessment of our intelligence community.
As you pointed out earlier, this is a national security issue that both Republicans and Democrats appear to be united on. And yet, when you look at the administration's handling, there's been some mixed messages, some would argue. On the one hand, we heard the president try and tie the Huawei issue to the broader trade agreement. We've also had the Department of Justice come out and say these are two separate issues. Do you think that Huawei should be a part of the trade discussions?
Well, first of all, I think that from an economic point of view, geopolitical point of view, from that perspective, our relationship with China today and forevermore is critically important, number one. Number two, there's hundreds of billions of dollars worth of mutual trade that goes to benefit the people and the economies of both countries. That is also indisputable. But at some point in time, someone has to draw a line of demarcation to say, okay, all these things we'll negotiate because it's in our mutual interest to come to some agreement. But as far as I'm concerned, national security and Huawei being embedded in your network, that is a non-negotiable item. Period.
Let's talk about something else that you are very familiar with as the former Homeland Security Director, and that is the issue of immigration. We got these reports this weekend that the Trump administration this week is considering plans to drastically reduce the number of refugees that would come into the U.S. I've heard you speak out before about how the immigration issue has been politicized by this administration. Just curious to get your thoughts on this proposal to potentially reduce the number of refugees that are coming in, and this administration's focus on that very border with the U.S. and Mexico.
You know, just focusing in on just the refugee issue and just that one of the narrow issues that is related to the need for a broad immigration reform is something that I find as a public servant and someone who was involved for years with Homeland Security and with the broader issue of immigration. I find it disturbing, very troubling. Both parties, not just this administration, and by the way, the leveraging of this issue for political purposes began before President Trump was elevated to the office. So my disappointment, Eco, is really is this. There are 5 or 6 really critical issues that if you and I had a chance to sit down with 8 or 10 groups of people and Americans, we could solve this problem. We want a secure border. We should do something with the Dreamers. We have to revisit the refugee and visa program. We need a better guest worker program. And all these things we could do if there was a will to do it on both sides of the aisle. And right now, in my judgment, both sides see advantages not to address the issue, but see it as leverage to winning elections. And I think there's a 2-part equation if you're going to be in government. You run to win and you win to govern. And right now it just seems the emphasis on running to win, and the problems, and it's complex, they can all be solved. We've ignored the reality and we've ignored the responsibility to create a meaningful, sustained 21st century immigration policy. It could be done. It can be done, but we don't have the political will to do it.
Oh, well, I think that's exactly the point. I mean, some of these, the points that you laid out right now are quite ambitious when you consider how polarized Washington is right now. So what is that one measure that you think both sides can actually agree on, given that we're right in the middle of the presidential campaign? I mean, what is that one thing that you think at least both sides can come to the table on?
I may disappoint you with my answer, but I think they're so leveraging this issue that it'll be impossible to find an agreement on one major substantive issue. There are 4 or 5 of them, but men and women of goodwill who want to solve the problem once we get through this election cycle will hopefully convene and get it done. We need a 21st century immigration policy. You and I know we're not sending back the 10 or 12 million people that came here illegally. But there are ways, very humane and proper and legal ways to deal with that issue. There's ways and better ways we could be using our ICE agents to go after the drug runners, the gangbangers, and those people, not separating kids from families when other than coming across the border, they've done nothing wrong and may have even contributed to that particular community, to their workplace. We know we need to secure the border, but we don't have to build a 3,000-mile wall. There's other ways we could do with existing technology. So securing the border, dealing with the Dreamers, et cetera, this could be done. You could detect it with my animated response to your very important question. My frustration is those responsible for governing have chosen to use this for elective purposes. They forgot their ultimate responsibility is to govern. These problems and this matter is soluble among men and women of goodwill on both sides of the aisle, and I happen to believe they exist. This is just not the environment to do it.
Okay, Secretary Ridge, appreciate your time today.
Nice conversation. Nice being with you. Thank you.